The kids are asleep.
This is the Rogue Podcast.
I'm Rebecca.
I'm Morgan.
We live together.
Work together.
And raise 4 kids together.
But she definitely has OCD and it's not diagnosed.
And she has no butt.
Not one to speak of. Not to cheek. But neither does she.
It would have been funner if I had the butt, but she has no butt. But I don't. It's fine. You could have said it about me.
It's fine. Neither of us has one ass, but if you added our two asses together. Betwixt us.
And neither do my children.
But you know who does?
My husband.
And my son. Lucky
They're
bastards.
not related at all.
They're not related at all.
Okay, so today we are going to dissect, judge, and all of the other words, the secret lives of Mormon wives.
Yep.
We're going to do the first 4 episodes in this episode, which is kind of confusing. And then next week we will do the last 4 episodes.
And then maybe some bonus content because we have been binging.
Yes. Many podcasts.
Binging podcasts.
And if this is a kind of podcast episode you like, we do have a few other shows that we are interested in doing this with. So let us know if there's any shows you can think of. What I was going to tell you before we started this is the new Love is Blind starts on October 2nd.
Thrilling.
And that's usually one that people have a lot of opinions about.
Okay, but also the Golden Bachelorette has started. And I know you're not that interested, but I'm so interested to see how it goes.
Okay, the only thing I care about for the Golden Bachelorette and the Golden Bachelor is they are so concerned about getting them their own Bachelor in Paradise. I want them to combine them. Put them on the beach with them young 25-year-olds.
Give me a sugar daddy.
Even if like that's not something they're interested at all. Like you're obviously going to have other Golden members down there. Mm-hmm. I think that would be so fun.
Yep.
We'll see how it goes. ABC, hit us up.
We've got so many ideas.
All right. So season 1, obviously, episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
This one, we really just kind of like meet everybody.
Yep. It's kind of a weird episode because they start this pilot and one of the cast members gets arrested. So they wait 8 months and then they go again.
Yep.
So,
I did. Okay. So this is also going to be, like we said, did a rabbit hole. So I also know that Taylor Frankie Paul, who's one of the cast members, some can argue like one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. She was the first one approached when this show was first thought of.
Yeah.
Everything was great. Everything was fine. She is, in fact, the one who gets arrested.
She is. I think she was probably approached because of what happened. If you've heard anything about this show and you're not living under a rock, you know that Taylor Frankie Paul was involved in a swinging scandal.
Soft swinging.
It wasn't that soft, y'all.
I mean,
it wasn't.
To Mormons, apparently.
Interesting. And from there, divorced her first husband. I would like to talk about the two of them because you don't see him at all, but I have some opinions. And so the first episode does focus on her a lot, but I think we should maybe go through and just like introduce the whole cast.
Yep.
And then kind of get into the plot of it.
Yep, that's fine. My little snippet though was that after she was arrested, they cut her from the show originally, and then reapproached her and wanted her to be kind of like a side. She maybe shows up in a few episodes and she said no. And then from what Taylor Frankie Paul says is Whitney is the one who spoke to production and spoke to a bunch of producers and got Taylor Frankie Paul back on the show.
Yeah.
And I have some opinions about that and we will get into those, but
yeah, it seems weird, but okay.
Yep.
So I'll do. Let's just go back and forth, I guess. Yeah. So obviously, Taylor is the first person we've started talking about. She is 28. She has kids, obviously. Her ex asked that they not be on the show. And actually, apparently her ex and his current spouse or significant other, whatever she is, they were actually asked to be on the show and they said no thanks. So they didn't really want the kids to be on camera. And a couple of them, I think, felt that way. So
yeah,
number
because
one,
the kids are very sporadic. Some we don't see at all. Some we
see quite a bit
barely see, or they're never really like a focal point.
No,
I guess.
no,
Which
the show's not about the kids,
No.
which I kind of like because so many of
mom shows.
And like YouTube channels like focus tons and tons on the kids, and I appreciate the fact that they're not.
Yeah.
I think I found it more interesting that way.
Even when you see them, you don't really see their faces all
Not a
that
ton.
often. It's always like them picking them
Like
up
in
or
passing.
yeah.
Mhm.
The next person we have is Whitney Levitt. She is 30. She's married to Connor. She does have a couple of kids. Obviously, they all have a couple. I don't know.
She's pregnant right now.
And she is pregnant right now. Yeah, she just moved back to Utah
From Hawaii.
Where they moved for 2 months.
Next on the list is Jen Affleck, and yes, her husband's cousin is in fact Ben Affleck. And every time they put her name on the screen, like instead of just her first name, like everybody else, she's always Jen Affleck. Makes me laugh every time. I wonder if it was like a stipulation. She's 24. She's married to Zach. They have 2 kids, and they actually do show their kids, I think, more than anybody else's. So.
Then we have Jessie, who is 30. She's married to Jordan. She, in my opinion, is a little bit more of a side character. We don't know a whole lot about her through just the show.
I actually have watched a podcast with just her, and I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm not quite finished with it yet, but Jessie is actually not a Mormon.
Yeah.
She's an ex-Mormon.
And this one's so funny to me because I'm sure everybody's been seeing all the TikToks of them like rating their husbands, and people are so obsessed with Jordan. We see him for 12 seconds.
He was very supportive. It was a good look.
12
Immediate
seconds.
good look. But yes, I agree. So next is Layla Taylor. She's 22. And in the first couple episodes, she's going through a divorce. Apparently before the show, she was a nanny.
Yeah.
Learned that on TikTok today.
Then next we have, of course, I get stuck with this one. Demi.
Okay.
Demi.
Her name, I learned this today also on TikTok, is Demetria, which is why it's pronounced that way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Demi, she's 29. So the ages we have, they're actually all a year older for most of the show because they pause for 8 months.
Right.
So we put all of these ages down when the first part of the first episode. So they're all technically a year older. So Demi is 30. She's married to Brett, who is 46.
And apparently was on The Bachelor.
And was on The Bachelor.
Or The Bachelorette, excuse me.
Yes, he was on The Bachelorette. He was on Claire's season. We all know what kind of a fucked up season that was.
I don't. Maybe we can talk about it someday.
It was mid-COVID. They stopped production after like 4 episodes.
Woof.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And then Claire ended up running off with one of the guys, and it didn't last.
Okay.
They met when Demi was 9, which sounds really gross, but it's not that gross. She is also divorced from her first husband, whom she has children with, and then her and Brett got married in 2021. Nope, 2022.
Okay. So then there's Macy. She is 27. She's married to Jacob. Her first child's father died when she was pregnant.
I think so.
I think so too.
I haven't watched any of her side podcasts yet.
Yep. And she was apparently a tennis player.
Professional tennis player.
Yeah.
She apparently, according to Taylor Frankie Paul, has a very cool story like to her life.
I have heard that also. And there's apparently a blog that kind of like runs down it. And before we do the next episode, I'm definitely going to read that.
She's on a few podcasts too that I would like to watch, which is funny because she is not my favorite. And then lastly, we have Michaela, who is 23. She's married to Jace. She seems very middle of the road. She's kind of Switzerland for a lot of these girls, I think.
And I may be wrong, but I watched a podcast. So Nick Viall had the rest of the girls on, and I watched that today. And frankly, it was so hard to follow because when there's that many girls in a room trying to talk in a podcast, following the conversation.
Did he not video it? He usually
No,
does.
he did. I was watching, but it was still like I was.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I think Michaela said she might be ex-Mormon also.
She claims to be one of the most devout ones in the beginning of the show.
Okay, I might be wrong.
She's in that group of 4 girls that are like remember the Sinners and the Saints episode?
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Another little weird tidbit about Michaela and her lovely husband Jace is Michaela got pregnant at 16 and Jace was 21. Yep. And they got married. She was 18 or 19, I think. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they've been together ever since, but that's a little icky, Jace. It's fine.
Right. Okay. So in the first episode, just kind of the beginning, we introduce everybody. Taylor does briefly go over her swinging scandal. Basically, her best friend and her best friend's husband, and then eventually a third couple start having all these parties, and it starts out, I want to say innocently, but like low key, with like the husband's being like, oh, it'd be so hot if you guys made out. And then like things escalated from there. And then her best friend's husband falls in love with her. She starts catching feelings for the third guy, and shit goes askew. All of these couples are now divorced.
I think the show is a little funny because it's almost a little clickbaity, because I think people were expecting to hear a lot more about the swinging scandal and or potentially have more of the people who were involved on the show.
Yeah.
And we don't see that. So the people on the show, other than Taylor, Frankie, Paul, claim no involvement in the swinging scandal.
So when we watched the very first episode, I remember Demi being like, I was there but had no idea this was going on, and we were like, liar. I really think she was telling the truth. The more I've watched and the more podcasts I watch and like their experiences, they were having large parties with lots of friends at them, and then they would leave. And
from the sounds of what Taylor, Frankie, Paul is saying is they would try and this is a gross word, but for lack of a better term, like recruit,
like suss it out. Who's into it.
And the conversation Demi has about it is pretty much that. Taylor was getting drunk and she was getting flirty, and Brett is also very flirty. So I think that was more so Taylor, Frankie, Paul just being like, maybe.
Yeah. And
then it was a no.
Yeah, it was a no. So her husband, I think Taylor says that her husband's kind of like, and Brett was like, well, I don't share, if that's what you mean. Yeah. And like just absolutely shut it down. And they never, and she said she's like, normally I pick stuff up. Like I am really, what is the word I'm looking for? You notice everything.
Observant.
Yeah. And I pick up on all kinds of like the crazy energies and whatever. And she's like, but I was also, that was like post my divorce, and Brett and I were together, but we were also kind of going through a hard time. And she's like, so I wasn't in my best place. So I just didn't.
I also found out, take it with a grain of salt, because I found it out on TikTok today or yesterday, that Demi and her ex-husband ultimately got divorced because she had postpartum depression.
Oh.
Yep.
Yep. That happens a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
In this episode, we meet Dakota, who is dating Taylor, Frankie, Paul. We find out he's a recovering addict who was really, really not doing well before he got sober. We also find out that Taylor, Frankie, Paul is potentially pregnant in this episode, in the beginning of it.
And she ends up... she has a miscarriage, or...
Yeah, that's in the next episode.
Yeah. That's in the next episode?
I believe so.
Oh, because I thought... Doesn't Whitney go over why she comes home in episode 1? Because... Yeah, in episode 1, when... It's like the second time we see Whitney, I think. They come home from Hawaii, and she sets them all down, and she's like... My husband was on Tinder. He's been on it like our whole marriage. He's been talking to people. And right after she's done talking, Taylor's like, pretty sure I'm having a miscarriage right now.
Yeah. And you and I actually had different opinions about this conversation. Whitney ends up pissed.
Yeah.
Because Taylor, Frankie, Paul
steals her thunder.
Yeah. personally sided with Whitney on this one, and I don't do that much in the rest of the season, so don't be waiting for it.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it was significant enough in Whitney's life that she moved away for 2 months, because she does later admit that that is why they left, and it wasn't to get away from the scandals.
Yeah, so she was like projecting her feelings onto Taylor and being like, it's so unfair, like I'm getting all this backlash because of you, because everyone thinks we're involved in this scandal, when she clearly, this is one thing I really like about Taylor, is that she has been through all of this. She's like, at the end of the day, I'm now sharing my experience, but I'm not going to name drop these people.
Yeah.
And so she never even said like who was part of it, and it's none of the people that are in this cast.
Yeah, I think it just negatively impacted all of Mom Talk, which I think Taylor Frankie Paul probably knew. But I also just didn't think it was the right place for Taylor to bring it up. I think if Taylor was having emotions and upset about a miscarriage, which I mean, I'm sure she was, then she could have chosen not to go to this get together. I know their relationship is strained, so that might have also like negatively impacted her. But yeah, that felt a little weird to me in the moment. So I got a little bit of Whitney's frustration. She also she didn't like flip out.
No.
She had a one-on-one interview where she was like, that was unnecessary, but like, okay.
I also think it was unnecessary, but in that, like our opinions are different, I think, because I was kind of like something traumatic was happening to her and she was just like trying to relate, I think, and it didn't come across in a good way at all. But like I tend to do that a lot. Like someone tells me something traumatic, I try to relate it just so I'm like, I kind of like, I'm listening. I kind of understand what you're going through and I'm trying. So I understand also why it's inappropriate to do that, but I understand how it can happen and it come off in a way that's like not cute.
Yeah.
Even if you meant it to be.
So I feel like we hear more from Whitney in this episode than we do in a lot of them. So Whitney does not drink. That's going to come up later.
Except that she does in the first scene.
That's going to come up later. That's in the second episode because you made a note about it.
I did. No, I didn't. On episode 1, why did Whitney try alcohol for the first time on TV?
Okay, I thought that was
at 30 years old.
Yep. So she tries it for the first time. They do champagne because they've moved back.
And she spit it out and washed her mouth out in the sink.
She did, because champagne's disgusting.
That was hilarious.
So why that was the first option, I'm not quite sure. I will say the only time I'm going to give Whitney props is that first sit down she has with Taylor Frankie Paul and I think Michaela when they go out to lunch together.
I think maybe.
She handled that so maturely to just be like, this is why I feel the way I do because of Taylor Frankie Paul outing, not outing, but like throwing everybody on blast. Like I would love to move past it. I would love to be friends. I thought she handled that very well. It's the only thing she handles well, but she did good. The biggest thing I have in here is every single time somebody saw Michaela in this first episode, they talked about how much weight she's lost.
She's suffering from an autoimmune disease. Yep.
So Michaela is suffering from some kind of skin condition. They haven't figured out what it is. And it's clearly affecting other parts of her life. And she is losing weight. And they all know this. It's common knowledge. She talks about it on the show. So the fact that they keep mentioning this grosses me out. So then we have Taylor Frankie Paul's what's the word I'm looking for? What's the cops? Video thing that the cops are?
Body cam footage.
Body cam. We have Taylor Frankie Paul's body cam footage from the domestic violence call that was made by a neighbor. I am quite proud of myself for this one because I just listened to a podcast Taylor Frankie Paul did. And in my notes, I say, it seems like she's lying about being scared of Dakota in the body cam footage. And she comes out on the podcast and says she, in fact, was. She was the aggressor. She was throwing items.
She was
drunk.
And he was not.
And she, mind you, was also dealing with a miscarriage. She was upset. Her hormones were elevated.
And she's been through one traumatic thing after another. And at this point in life, the woman is just not coping well.
No.
And can anyone blame her?
No. And unfortunately, her children were home. And from what I gather, it's still unclear. But in the police report, it is noted that her daughter was hit with something that Taylor Frankie Paul had thrown.
Uninjured.
I'm sure it was still. So that's kind of where this episode dwindles off. And we see Taylor Frankie Paul getting arrested.
Yeah. I've got a couple of notes other than what we've gone through that I had marked. I seriously was like, Whitney, why? You're supposed to be a devout Mormon. Here's the first little asterisk. They're not supposed to drink.
Nope.
Alcohol, coffee, tea, I think is on the list. I don't remember for sure, but I know alcohol and coffee are big fat ones. And so she considers herself one of the more devout Mormons on this show. Why, other than for attention, would you ever decide this is the time to try alcohol, other than it's the first scene you're in on this TV show?
Yeah.
It immediately grossed me out.
Also, another thing, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 8 cast members who are divorced. And that is also
big fat no's.
Big no in Mormonism. Yeah. So they all, not all, a good portion of them claim to be super devout, but I digress.
All right. We can kind of move on to the second episode now. I think we kind of, so this episode really starts. So Taylor is now pregnant, super duper pregnant. And it's,
this is ... 8 months later from the first episode, because Taylor was arrested. She dealt with all of her court proceedings. Production did what production did. And now here we are 8 months later. And Whitney is, I don't know, what would you say, 6 or 7 months now?
Taylor,
sorry, not Whitney.
Yes.
Because then we follow her for the rest of her pregnancy.
Visibly.
Yeah. She's quite pregnant. She's out of breath almost every episode.
And it's like, whether or not I'm like happy about what she's doing in any episode, every time she just like huffs and puffs, I'm like, oh, you cute little pregnant thing, you. I know, I remember that feeling so hard. So my first impression at the very beginning of this episode was that Whitney was already realizing that Taylor was probably going to be like the alpha on this show. And she was trying to think of ways to get rid of her immediately.
I have also found, Taylor Frankie Paul said this in a podcast I listened to, and I believe Macy has also said it, that maybe it's not Macy because she's very close to Whitney, but anyway, they all believe that Whitney tried to get Taylor Frankie Paul back on this show so badly because she was convinced that she would be the villain, and that Whitney would reign all.
Yeah.
And
one thing that I immediately noticed from the first episode to the second is the first episode, Taylor, I don't know if you want to say she comes off as a villain, but she kind of comes off as a train wreck. She's not making a lot of good decisions. Her emotions are all crazy. And I would say her emotions are kind of all over the place for a lot of this. But again, she is very pregnant for this part. But I think that, and from watching the show and listening to the podcasts I have, Taylor really hit a moment in that rock bottom when she got arrested and decided to turn her life around. And try to be a really good person and try to, like, just kind of get it together. And I think that that's evident throughout the rest of the season. She's really trying, and you don't see this side of it on the show quite as much, obviously, as you do from podcasts, but this girl holds so much self-hatred inside her body for all the things that she has done from the swinging scandal. When she talks about that, she can get through most of it.
Yeah.
Until she starts talking about hurting her ex-husband, and then she breaks down every time, and she's not forgiven herself for that, and I don't know if she will.
And they do also have a really good relationship now.
Yeah, like co-parenting, and he's got another significant other, and so I think that at the end of the day, she probably really loves him.
I'm excited for season 2 because in season 1, pretty much the only thing we see of Taylor Frankie Paul is her and Dakota fighting.
Yeah.
You and I also have very different stances on this one.
Yeah.
My first note on here is Taylor, honey. You are pregnant, therefore you're fully in, marriage or not.
Yeah.
Like
she's in this. You see this throughout the rest of the season. She is in a relationship with Dakota, wants to be in a relationship, but is like, marriage, no.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not ready. I'm not all the way in it. I don't trust myself. I don't trust him. And
I also have somewhere else in here. I don't know if it's this episode, but I remember this note specifically. Like, if you weren't ready for marriage, then don't get pregnant, because we also find out that they are either trying or failing miserably and not trying.
Because the pregnancy, she
has a miscarriage.
She has a chemical pregnancy.
And then she has a chemical pregnancy, and then she gets pregnant with this baby. All in a span of 8 months. So you guys are either really good at trying or really bad at not trying to.
Yeah. And the first miscarriage, I guess, was an ectopic.
Yeah.
So
but like, and she feels so strongly about not being ready for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
but you've gotten pregnant so many times.
Yeah. So
yeah. And I even from this episode could tell, and I wrote, Taylor doesn't think that she deserves happiness, so she self-sabotages and continues to make things worse. And I think that is something that is a really hard cycle to break out of.
Yeah.
With everything she's been through, she's just...
From seeing her on the show, I am also somebody who did not follow this prior to watching this show.
Me either.
So I have a little bit of a different view on it, because until I started digging a little bit deeper, the show was the only like view I got of all of these people. And so from watching this show and then listening and watching some of the things that Taylor Frankie Paul has done since the show has ended, she has already like grown so much from what she's been through, and I mean, a good portion of what she's been through, she's put herself through, but like she's
very self-aware.
Yeah. She's figuring it out.
Part of the whole mom talk thing is very interesting with a Mormon dynamic, because they're big on the empowerment of women, which is not easy to do in any religion that I'm aware of, because typically women are secondary, but especially in Mormonism, the men are only allowed to be in the priesthood, and their wives are supposed to be like, the word that Taylor uses constantly is I just slipped out of my brain. I don't want to
Subservient.
So, yeah, submit or let go all of my stuff to him.
I mean, it's like the olden days. The women stay at home, they cook, they raise the babies,
and it's still very much like that to this day. And they're trying to flip that a little bit. So already, I'm sure the Mormon Church was like, red flag, because even most of what these women are doing is not overly racy in the eyes of most people in 2024, but a lot of the stuff that they post is,
I mean, they're twerking on TikTok.
They are twerking on TikTok. Yeah. So it's kind of
any normal, I don't want to say normal, but any 30-year-old on TikTok is just going to scroll right through and see it and be fine.
Be like,
a Mormon is going to be mortified.
Yeah. And the other thing with these women is that for a good percentage of them, I didn't count, but it was more than half. They were the primary breadwinner in their family.
I think it was all of them.
I think there was one that said there weren't, or maybe two that weren't primary.
See, I thought it was all of them.
But yeah, so that is also even in non-religious households, in very traditional households, it's supposed to be the man, and you clean things and I make money, and it's just not like that for them. So I'm sure their dynamics can be hard to navigate, and we see that for sure with Jen and Zach, even from the very beginning.
I was just about to bring them up. So to put this in a little bit of perspective, Zach is going to school to be a brain surgeon. And he comes from a line of surgeons, brain surgeons, I think, to be specific. And Jen makes a comment. I don't know if it's in this episode, but she makes a comment that even when he is a practicing brain surgeon, she will still be the breadwinner. So like they're bringing in the dough.
She's also paying for him to go through school, and his family had given them a chunk of money.
I have that later.
And he gambled it away. Yeah, we could talk about that later, but we can get more into it. So all that being said, I kind of do relate some of this. My next note is the fact that there's a sex toy element to this episode.
Yeah, so I actually have something about this too, because they in this episode bring up a lot that they have a lack of brand deals happening right now. And I think they're saying it without saying it, that they think it's Taylor Frankie Paul's fault that they're not getting brand deals. And then we find out about Whitney, and she has the opportunity to have a sex toy brand deal.
And all they wanted to do is just post a picture smiling with it. And that's
photo.
That's it.
She doesn't have to turn it on.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to do anything with it. She ends up going to her mom and her younger sister and asking their opinion on it, because she is
very devout.
She is very devout, and she is leaning towards doing it because it's like $20,000.
I don't remember how much, but it's like a lot
she doesn't
of money.
Like fully say, but she they guess, and I think she's like, so she ends up going to, I think she went to her mom and her little sister for them to be like, yeah, obviously it's $20,000. And that is not what they did.
No. I wrote all the free sex toys alone. Do you know how much money that's worth?
Also, she ends up doing it. So I did see the photo with the sex toy.
Yep.
My next one just says, Jen annoys the fuck out of me.
You can't stand. I don't mind Jen, but you cannot
stand her. Her voice, it is most likely because she is one of the most devout out of the 8. My family is not religious at all. My dad and my stepmom very much so follow in a lot of the
like traditional
ways of life. And if I, as an adult, have to watch my stepmother make my father a plate of food again, I will curl up and die.
Well, get ready to die at Thanksgiving.
Yes, I know. No, he actually does his own plate at Thanksgiving.
Look at him go.
She would not put enough food on that plate. Let's be real. So I don't know if that's where my annoyance comes from so much, because I have seen it a good portion of my life. My dad and my stepmom have always been this way. My grandmother and my grandfather are not quite as traditional, but she still almost always plated his food. My stepmom used to cut my dad's meat.
It's so funny. I didn't even know this was a thing that people did till I was an adult, because I never experienced anyone do it ever until I was like late in my teens.
It's so weird to me. It absolutely not. Tyler will forever get his own fucking food. So I don't know I don't know if that's why Jen irks me so bad. She just annoys the fuck out of me.
During the sex toy conversation, because Whitney also talks to the girls about it.
Yep.
And Layla just casually drops that at 22, she's never had an orgasm.
We also at this point don't know that Layla is getting divorced yet.
We don't.
So I remember
I was like,
Morgan convulsing because she said that on national television.
And she's married. And I was like, oh my God. like you have kids.
And that's one that surprises me a little bit because she's actively going through the divorce while on this show. And we don't hear about them at all. Like their relationship, what
they
happened.
really avoid the topic of the exes. Entirely.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm sure that also like potentially has something to do with like them not signing off on certain things. And
the other thing, Jen talks about sending nudes to her husband. And I was like, are they allowed to do
that? I don't know why they wouldn't be. Spooky. To their own husband, though.
Yeah, I know. But it seems like they're like the vibe I get from not just this show, but like growing up with Mormons from this area and also like the YouTube experience I have because I went down a rabbit hole with before Ruby Frankie did crazy child abuse things. Her entire family was YouTubers and I followed a lot of them and I learned a lot about Mormonism through them. And I also have just lots of experience on social media with all this stuff. And so I'm like, they're just very, very demure, very, I don't have to go through the whole thing, but like, so the thought of them like shooting a nude and sending it, I was like, oh, scandalized.
What do I have here? So we hear a lot from Taylor Frankie Paul again. Her parents come over to her house and we find out that Dakota is moving in and her parents flip.
Okay, here's the other thing. Her mom is an awful human being.
I was wondering if you were going to mention that because you had it in the first episode.
Yep. I was gearing up.
We also find out we don't like her dad in this episode. It's weird to me that they're so upset about it. She's pregnant. It's
because they want them to be married first.
Right, which I also have this in here. I said, isn't it weird that Taylor Frankie Paul's parents keep telling her to do it alone? That's the choice you made. You can do it by yourself. Since when is that how it works with Mormons?
The thing
you get pregnant, you get married.
They're like, I think they're split 50-50 down the middle. Like, hurry up and get married to this man because it looks bad for us. And 50% he's an ex-drug addict and we can't stand him. And that also looks bad for us.
Right. Because if it was all about the marriage, they would be on Dakota's side because he's the one who wants to get married.
Yeah. So they kind of want her to get married, but they kind of want her to break up with him. They don't want her to live in whatever it is she's doing because they don't like him. And their image is being thrown off. Yeah. So they need her to fix it in one direction or the other. And they're frustrated because she won't.
I come for Taylor apparently in this episode because I say, Taylor, what exactly are your morals and values? Not to knock sex before marriage, because I had sex before marriage.
Like a lot of it.
But as a Mormon, you're pregnant out of wedlock. You're moving in with your boyfriend. You're already divorced. You have an arrest record and you're a drunk. So like, where, ma'am, are the morals and values? Because they're not there.
No. And at this point, she has decided to go back to the church.
Yes.
And I remember I wrote this. I said, she really is taking the hard way back, knowing full well church members will judge and shame her. And I wondered if it was more self-sabotage and punishment for her past decisions. Like she knew it was going to be hard and terrible and she thought she deserved it. So she wanted to put herself through whatever they had to dish at her.
Yeah. We also see Taylor Frankie Paul's baby shower in this episode. She has it at the White Shanty, which is Mormon owned. And my one note about this, which is so funny because this was such a big deal, is I'm shocked that the White Shanty is allowing an event for a baby shower for a baby out of wedlock. Mm-hmm. I was shocked. Mm-hmm. And that's the only note I have, which is interesting.
But they also knew that this woman has a ginormous social media following.
And it was a stunning location.
Oh, yeah.
Whitney decides to not attend. It's a big thing, big deal.
She's basically like, I hate Taylor.
Yep.
In this episode.
I was never her friend. So why would I fake it on TV?
Yeah.
Because you faked it on TikTok. So Taylor's mom ends up calling Whitney because she's not
during
there.
the baby shower.
I can see the bottom of your notes, and all I can see is Taylor's mom's the worst. I'll keep saying it. It's probably about the phone call.
I don't know. I cannot stand this woman. She, for me, is the epitome of that religious narcissist who only cares about the way her family looks to the public. And this is very common in very religious households. And the episode of a podcast I watched with Jesse is, I can't remember what the girl's name is. It was a good podcast though. She is an ex-Mormon, and her whole podcast is kind of like about the breaking down of that and relationships and da 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 da. And so, Jessie actually had her ex-husband's parents were like Mormon royalty in Utah, and she never felt good enough, and they made sure of it because she wasn't Mormon enough, she wasn't perfect enough, blah blah blah. So like that kind, and it doesn't really matter what people might do, it's about what it looks like. And I feel like Taylor's mom is that, and it drives me. I wrote this note, and you're not going to agree at all. I wrote, Macy seems like a good friend so far. She wants to make sure that Taylor is in a healthy relationship, and she sees a lot of red flags with Dakota. So another ongoing theme in this whole season is how much Macy fucking hates Dakota and likes to make it well known. So I
don't want to sit here and say I'm Team Dakota. I believe him in a lot of the things he says.
I do too.
And now that Taylor Frankie Paul has done a few of these podcasts, everything that was like in question, she is debunked. So like rightfully so, I believed him. Is Dakota really that good of an actor? Macy is saying that she's witnessed him calling Taylor Frankie Paul a slut, a bitch, and a whole bunch of other things. And we just don't see that.
Yeah.
We see Dakota say something, Taylor Frankie Paul fly off the deep end about whatever it was, and then him come crawling to apologize almost every fight.
I am not Team Taylor, Team Dakota. I'm team these two need to break up.
Yeah. In the show, they're doing fantastic now.
That's what it looks like on social media. I'm waiting to see season 2.
Yeah.
Social media can look however you want.
I made an interesting note about Layla, and I feel like it continues throughout the show.
Okay.
She has a lot of really good opinions, but she never says them in the moment.
No,
she waits until interview. Yeah, she waits until her one-on-one. And that is so weird to me. She also seems like kind of the afterthought of the group.
And she's the youngest, and she probably doesn't want to step on toes.
She's like intimidated a little bit. And then the last thing I have for this is the Team Taylor or Team Whitney dynamic is so common in friend groups for like two headstrong individuals of the group to, I don't want to say want to be the leader because friend groups aren't cults, but like
that's what it is.
The top dog.
Yeah.
And alpha. For it to be a battle until somebody wins. And frankly, when somebody wins, usually the other person is out.
I will say though, that dynamic, I expect it to last and be forever the thing, and it's not.
No.
It's over already.
Yep.
I had a couple of other small. Okay. My opinion through this episode of Dakota changed quite a bit. At first I was like, this man seems like he's really trying for a fresh start. He really likes her, et cetera, et cetera. And then the dynamic between he and Macy was just yucky to me because she's like, I don't like you for these reasons. I think you have red flags. And he doesn't deal well with that fact, which I mean, it's probably human nature. Yeah. But also like they both love Taylor. So you'd think they'd be able to come to some sort of, I feel like there's a lot of friend and husband relationships like that though.
Especially somebody, I can sort of see Dakota's defensive side in this part because Macy and Taylor are so close. So like, what is she saying about me when they're together and I'm not there? And
yeah,
I like Dakota, so I will defend.
So I was jumping back to Whitney was discussing her wedding night. I think it was during the sex toy talk because she was trying to talk to her mom about like It doesn't have to be shameful, and it doesn't have to be vulgar and blah, blah, blah. And then at some point they start talking about Whitney's wedding night, and she said it was a nightmare. And it was like Bridgerton level, not knowing anything about what goes where and who does what and et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, what year is it? They have the internet.
Yeah, but the thing is Whitney was so devout that even looking that up on the internet is a no.
Yeah. I did also say that out of the parents we've seen so far, Whitney ends up being terrible, but her mom seems like a decent mother, like supportive. And she's like, I don't agree with this. I don't think it's fits in my morals, but if you want to do it, you're an adult and this is your decision. And I liked that because a lot of people.
It's also nice too to see the dynamic because so Whitney is how old? Whitney's a 30-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. And her sister is still in high school. So like there's a decent age gap there, yeah. But it's nice. It sucks for Whitney, but it's nice to have the knowledge you have because she seems to have passed a lot of it down to her sister.
Yeah. And I think also her mom like has adjusted her parenting style
to the year word.
Yeah, because Whitney was like, I can't remember what they were talking about. She was like, I would never have been allowed. Mm-hmm. You count your little blessings, girl. So, yeah.
Now we're on episode 3, the Book of Saints and Sinners.
Yes.
So I have first and foremost, we meet Zach's family.
It's his graduation party, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, because then they talk about Mm-hmm. We had different opinions on this one too, I believe. So Zach's family, like I said, whole family of brain surgeons. So they're already fucking brilliant. Mm-hmm. Very devout. Very.
Also, he's one of the scariest looking human beings I've ever laid my eyes upon.
Who is?
Zach.
Why is he scary?
Oh, he's spooky.
Okay.
I don't know if it's that blonde hair or what, but I'm like, oh, villain.
So we meet them. Jen alludes to the fact that she doesn't feel fully accepted. She comes from different backgrounds. They are, like I said, very devout. They have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They're very high in the Mormon community. And so we're at Zach's graduation party, and Jessie and her husband Jordan bring alcohol. So the graduation party is at Zach's parents' house. Mm-hmm. So they bring alcohol, and Jen is pissed. I personally am on Jen's side on this one. I think it's very disrespectful.
I've learned more information about this, and my opinion is even more solid.
Yeah, if it were Jen's house, mm-hmm. I think even that's a little bit different, but also is like still kind of the same because Jen doesn't drink. So It's almost like the aspect of going over to a recovering alcoholic's house. You're not going to bring alcohol because they don't drink. Mm-hmm. And she asks them twice to not do it, and they still continue to pass around the flask.
That part I was like, that's the one part that I was like, not so much. So my thoughts on this, and I've learned since, they were outside. They didn't do it in front of his parents.
I don't think that matters at all.
I thought that mattered some. And then
it's still their house.
So the plan for that night that they don't show on camera is that directly after they finish this, they go clubbing, which is Jen's choice. Like she planned it.
I mean, that's fine.
And so
drink when you're clubbing.
She was like, we were literally pre-gaming because drinks are $15 a piece. And it's just like a thing we do.
That doesn't make it any better for me.
See, it just doesn't seem that big of a deal to me.
Yeah, that's a no for me. No, I don't know. I didn't like this at all. It's one of the only times I don't like Jessie. Mm-hmm. And frankly, this makes me not like Jordan. So everybody who's like team Jordan, I'm like, nope, he's a no for me.
He was a little kind of gross about it.
Yep. I don't care if you're in their driveway. That it's their property. They don't drink, and they're very strict about it. Yeah. Yeah. And this one's a no for me.
Fair enough.
What else do I have in here? According to Whitney, Jen, and Macy are the most devout of the group.
And Whitney clearly thinks she is better than everyone because of it.
Laughing gas is the Mormons' drug.
We don't do drugs, so we drink a lot of soda, except for when we do Botox, so we can do laughing gas. And they also say at some point that they tried ketamine.
Oh, I missed that, I guess.
Yeah.
So in this is obviously the like Jen and Zach episode, because we also find out that they are doing, what do they call it?
A baby blessing.
Baby blessing.
Which is a really big thing in the Mormon tradition.
Also is this one also at his parents' house? No, it was at Jen's house.
Yeah, it was at Jen's.
The entirety of the group was invited at first. Not official invites. There wasn't paper invitations.
No, there was
there
was a date and time in the group message that was like a formal.
Still isn't a formal invite to me. But they did show clips of a conversation in a vehicle where she told them it was happening, said that she would like them to be there. And then
uninvites them.
For Jesse, Taylor, Demi, and Layla are uninvited.
Yeah.
They say that they're uninvited because they're not the closest to them, and they were making it like very close family and friends. It's also a very religious event. And she just didn't think they'd be into it. Jen definitely doesn't like confrontation. You can see that clearly in this episode.
I've learned since then. At first in that episode, I thought she was using her husband as a scapegoat, and it's not the case at all. This was his choice.
And so this one I struggle with, for my opinion, because the inviting and then uninviting
not cool
is not cool. It makes sense to me to not invite people who are not fully committed to your religion to a very religious event. And also, it's her child, and she's allowed to invite who the fuck she wants, friend or not.
I don't remember where I saw this, but one of the girls was talking on a podcast and was kind of like, first of all, what did you think we were going to do with this, that was going to be this embarrassing for you? But also, really devout people you would think would use this as a beautiful moment to share with people who are on the fence or not that devout, because it would make them feel the spirit and like see the beautiful things and want to be more involved. And I thought that was a good point. It can be more about image. Like, I understand also wanting to keep things small and intimate for your family, but like, don't, like, if that's just an excuse, it's because they are like less worthy, which they use that term a lot when they talk about their religion, then that's icky.
I also am going to go back to your, like, what are we going to do? That would be so embarrassing to you. Bring alcohol, because you did it in the event we just held. So, I mean, I think Jen has grounds to back her decision. I think she doesn't go about it properly.
No.
And I think that's probably something that's very common for her.
And you do start to see in this episode a small hint of Zach being pretty controlling.
Yep.
And that continues, and it gets worse kind of as the season goes on, and he ends up being the male villain of the show.
Yeah. I put, maybe Mom Talk just needs to realize that they aren't all friends. And I don't think they need to be.
No.
They very much so describe it as a business now.
Yeah.
So like,
I wrote, these girls are just straight up mean to each other's faces. I don't understand. I don't know what part that was from, but it's a fact.
The worst part is they're more mean behind their backs.
Yeah.
They do a lot of shit talking.
Oh, I remember what it was. So this is also the episode where Demi throws the Galentine's party.
Yep.
And this is where you first get your, like, Whitney is nasty, yucky, gross.
She also wears fucking pajamas.
She wears pajamas, and everybody else is dressed up so nice and cute. But anyway, so Demi apparently is a little rough on time management. She's like, still getting ready when people arrive. But while that's happening, it flashes to Whitney getting ready with a few of the other girls. And she is straight up just making fun of her.
Yep.
While she's getting ready to go to this girl's party. And I'm like,
so there's also apparently a little bit of a sex story with Demi and her spouse that Demi tells the group at some point, not on the show, and it involves Fruity Pebbles. We don't know what it is.
We do not have more details.
Her and her husband do, in fact, get into a little bit of an argument about Demi speaking about their sex life with her friends in such detail. So I think it's smart that we don't get any details in this show because she's like, I already crossed that line. I'm not going to do it on national television.
Yeah.
So Whitney gives Demi a gift.
In a stunning box.
That is a cake with fruit, or is it just a whole box of Fruity Pebbles?
Box of Fruity Pebbles. It's wildly inappropriate.
It's gross. Also, at some point, you do flash to Macy saying that there's no way this happened. How would you know, babe? Are you in the bedroom with them?
Yeah, that was a weird thing.
And she was like so adamant. Like this didn't happen.
Why would she tell us if it didn't happen? She's having sex with her own husband.
Weird to me.
Yeah, that's weird. I remember being like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And then I put, Whitney, just because you know a story doesn't mean you have the right to joke about it.
I even said, why are these girls shaming their friends for what they do with their own husbands in the bedroom?
Yeah. And I think that was probably a good portion of why Demi's like, nope. Because I told the people I should trust the most outside of my husband, and they have done nothing but make fun of me for it. So Whitney cries like a little baby because Demi does not take the gift well. She handles it maturely and is just like, thank you.
I'm not happy with you.
Yeah.
That's not great.
And Whitney cries in the corner and says that she feels ambushed. And in my opinion, she's the one who ambushed Demi. So
why? First of all, it wasn't I just have so many opinions about this episode, but this is where I was just like, Whitney, absolutely not. You don't get to play victim because you upset somebody else.
Yep.
I have had multiple people in my life who do that, and it is infuriating.
Yeah. Whitney, just stop. Just stop. Yeah. Apparently that was not that interesting of an episode because we don't have that many notes. No. It was really two events. It was, frankly, Jen and Zach just aren't that interesting.
No.
They're gross, and that's the end of it.
If Jen and Zach are divorced by season 2, no one's going to be shocked.
Yeah. So episode 4 is the Book of Truth. This is when they go on the trip.
The girls' trip that ends in heartbreak and crying. So it starts out, I remember, and I don't know if they're even on the trip yet, but a bunch of the girls start kind of talking about Whitney, which I don't love, but it is what it is. They start talking about her. And one thing I really liked about Taylor, because at this moment it's very clear it's like a Whitney versus Taylor. Things are not going well. And she does not egg them on at all. She just kind of sits there and lets it happen, which frankly, I'm sorry. I don't think you always have to be the one to stop other people shit talking necessarily. Yeah. It's not your job. They're grown adults. But I did think it was very mature of her for just sit there and let it happen and not like pop off.
So they go on this girls' trip. I am now figuring out that I'm not very good at taking notes. I just like make a note and I'm like, what is this about?
Yeah.
So they play a game in the same box that the Fruity Pebbles were in. This is Demi's idea. They put anonymously, they all write questions. They put them in a box.
I think she called it like the truth box.
Yeah. They put them in the box and then they take them out and they answer. And usually the questions are directed at one human being. Whitney at first is like kind of annoyed about the game. And she says, I quote, "If you want to tell someone the truth, just go say it to their face." And I'm sorry, Whitney. Stop talking.
You just didn't go to someone's baby shower because you said you didn't like him when you woke up one day.
I said, it's so much bullshit. She doesn't confront a single human being for the legitimate things she's feeling.
Yeah.
So I just had to throw that in there. It was gross. Go ahead.
Yep. I just wrote, so this was Macy's birthday trip. I think the reason they're going on this. And I've wrote this probably only once, but I remember thinking it multiple times. What the fuck is Whitney wearing?
I was hoping you were going to say that.
What is she wearing? Multiple times. And her little, like, she changes her hair every 10 minutes, which I'm okay with because I am also that kind of human.
I have in the first episode
that
Whitney
red hair
with the red hair.
Looks
Why
great.
She got rid of that?
I don't know. She's been all over the board since then. But but her hair, she's got a beautiful, beautiful face and the most perfect porcelain skin.
Yeah.
And what the fuck is she always wearing? I don't understand.
Thankfully, most of this episode, they're in matching jumpsuits. Not jumpsuits, sweatsuits.
Yep. And so
one of the first questions is to Whitney, and it's, why don't you like Taylor? And she answers it and doesn't answer the question at all.
No.
I don't even remember what she says
because it was unimportant. She's like, I'm not going to talk about that, or like
it was unimportant.
Yeah. They got to their drama later in the episode. I don't know if this is from the questions or from earlier in the episode, but I wrote, Jen and Zach's have issues because he thinks his career is more important, but he's literally years off from that being the case.
Yeah.
He's a student and she's making enough money to pay for everything in your life and your gambling habit. Sit down and shut up.
Yeah. Where am I? Whitney, she just loves to stir the pot, and it's going to end up biting her in the ass. And we see that it does. I didn't know that when I made this note, but
so it also comes out in this episode, specifically the most like dramatically, that part of Whitney's issue is that when her child was an infant, he got RSV and was in the hospital. And she did a dance video in the hospital with him in the bassinet, literally in the shot. And the world was like, hey, girl, maybe don't use your sick baby
for clout. Yeah.
Like almost direct quote from one of the people. And she was like, I wouldn't do that. You literally did. And so anyway, the world is still hating on her for it. And she is losing her mind and she's pissed because Taylor, in her mind, is not receiving enough hate. It's not enough yet. And it's not fair that she gets any.
Yep. In this episode, it also comes out that Demi had at one point called Taylor white trash. And I want to debunk this a little bit because in the whole conversation, they talk about how she said that she is making trashy decisions. That is not white trash.
Not the same thing.
Two completely different things. They end up bickering back and forth about it. I think Demi says things a lot. I think she just flies off the seat of her pants sometimes and says things that she isn't fully meaning.
What I wrote in this circumstance, because there was like, Demi had a pretty big like kind of moment here going back and forth with some of them. And I wrote, Whitney, yelling louder doesn't not make you not the liar. And I said, I think I like Demi because she is going to call you out for your nonsense, but she also kind of gave people space and owned up for her part in saying things about people. And so she was like, at the end of the day, you know what? Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that, but also this is how it is. And I like that about her. I think she might be one of my favorite people on this show.
I agree. And so it's on this same card that Whitney and Demi end up going at each other because Demi says that Whitney said that Jen was too Mormon. And so apparently Macy was in this conversation. And when immediately confronted about it, Macy's like, I don't remember this. I don't remember who said what. And by the end of Macy and Whitney going back and forth, Macy agrees that Whitney didn't say it because Whitney just beats her down until she tells her what she wants to hear.
Like, stop talking. Yeah.
And you can almost see that, like, okay, like I agree with you in Macy's eyes. And Macy is also not one of my favorites, but in this moment I did feel bad for her because she
was basically browbeaten to saying whatever.
Yeah. And it made her, we see a separation in this group happen, and a good portion of them separate from Macy a little bit. And I think this moment has to do with it because she was forced to say it.
Okay. So after this night, which ends in heartbreak for everybody, they have all these little blow-ups. The next day, Taylor goes to Whitney and she's like, let's just hash this out. Let's like have a talk. And immediately going into this, Taylor turns to go walk to the space they're going to have the talk. And Whitney's in the background making faces like a toddler behind her back. And I was like, this is going to be really good television, but this is going to piss me off. I knew it immediately.
I didn't write a whole lot about this interaction because
I did.
Frankly, I just don't care that much about Whitney or anything she has to say. I do have Whitney can't tell Taylor Frankie Paul that she is mad at solely just Taylor Frankie Paul when she says that she didn't get anything from anyone after she told them about the Connor and the Tinder drama. Whitney complains about this so many times in this season about something happening or her doing something and nobody reaching out.
Yeah.
And
that's been debunked on most accounts every single time. Someone's like, also, but I literally did though.
It's not their job to reach out to you when you're pouting in a corner.
Yeah. So I wrote quite a few notes about this. I wrote Whitney's issues with Taylor are literally not making sense. She's just saying a bunch of words. This must be a jealousy of her fame, but also she thinks she deserves to be more famous and get more because she's a better Mormon. Those are the vibes I was getting. Also, so they go back to that part where she's pissed at Taylor for saying the thing about her miscarriage when she's telling the group about, and Whitney literally says the words, when I told my story, I just wanted it to be about me, no matter what else was happening with anyone else. I don't know if that's a direct quote or if it was just like the gist of what she said, but she literally said that. She's like, I don't care what else is happening in her life.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to make it about me. And I still agree that that was maybe not the best moment, but I can understand, again, why she would have done it. And apparently she has apologized since then and like whatever else. But I was just like, that is just so much grosser to me. So during this, who comes upstairs? Demi,
yes.
Yeah.
And that's why they're all mad at
Demi. Because she can hear Whitney lying.
Yeah.
And so she hops up over the stairs and she's like, abso-fucking-lutely not. This is ridiculous. And Whitney ends up running downstairs to cry in a corner.
Yeah, and she gets coddled. Grossly
and it's disgusting.
Coddled.
Yeah, I said, first I said Whitney couldn't apologize if her life was on the line. And then during the part where she's being coddled, she starts swearing a ton. And this is like probably a mean girl comment of me, but like I grew up with a Mormon family who I was pretty close with. And swearing is also like not something they do a ton of. They like in the ones I've seen on the internet, there's a couple of things that they say, but they usually like have silly little phrases instead kind of vibes. And Whitney swears a ton in this, and it gives the like she's just doing it to seem like a cool kid vibes. Just in the way she says words, it's kind of weird to me. Like, why are you in? It just doesn't seem natural coming out of her mouth. Like it's very calculated. This
is also kind of the breaking point for a lot of people in this group with Whitney. While she's being coddled, I think she's in a closet.
Or the bathroom or something. And Jen and Layla and whatever
are on the floor with her.
Yeah.
But then so Jesse and Demi end up. They kind of gang up on her a little bit, which frankly she deserves. So like, don't feel bad for her. But Jesse ends up, and this is one of the few times in an altercation like this that we hear from Jesse. And she ends up stating that being friends with Whitney is like a revolving door, that she's friends with you until she gets what she needs, and then she moves on to the next.
And she tells her this to her face, which and
if I remember correctly, Demi backs her and is like, yeah, like that's exactly what happened to me. And I think we're seeing it because she very much so looked like she was friends with Taylor Frankie Paul until she didn't benefit her anymore. And now she's out. And now it seems like Macy is that person.
And apparently it has happened with multiple of them where they felt really close to Whitney at one time or another. And then it just like ends.
Yeah.
I said, Whitney needs attention. She might catch on fire without it. I'm pretty sure. And I said, Demi just wants people to be held accountable for their actions. And I think that's an okay personality trait, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I did notice at this point that Macy and Whitney are supposed to be very close. And so in the moment, she was kind of coddling her and she was trying to be team Whitney and da-da-da. And then in her one-on-one, she's like, I love her and I'm friends with her, but also, and she kind of gives her opinion. And I'm like, as her best friend, I think you should be holding her accountable for her actions a little bit. But it's also hard because like with you and me, I'm like, you're always right, you perfect angel.
I also just think Macy likes to talk shit.
A little bit.
No matter if she's your best friend or not. She likes to point out your flaws. She's good at it.
Yeah.
And Whitney has a lot of them to point out, so.
Yeah. So that's it for episode 4.
Okay, so let's recap a little bit.
Yep.
Taylor Frankie Paul, dating Dakota, pregnant. They are miserable. He wants to get married. She's not ready. They
Big dramatic fights about it constantly.
But they fight a lot. Whitney, the devil.
Worst human.
She's awful.
0 out of 10.
Her husband has been not cheating, I guess, because he never
met up with people. He was just talking to them.
Yep. So
like,
he's been caught on Tinder or not. I don't even think he was caught. I think he came out with it.
Someone said it and she brought it to him like a joke and he was like, well, might as well tell you. Yeah.
Jen and Zach are one of the more devout I think we see in the first 4 episodes.
And you can already tell their marriage is a little rocky.
Yeah, but we don't see a whole lot of it yet. We see them a lot more later on.
Yep.
Jesse and Jordan, we only see them.
You don't really start hearing from Jesse quite as much until the second half of the series. And because at this point I did not have an opinion of her at all. I don't even know if I wrote a note about her.
I don't really have an opinion about her for the whole season. I also, at this point, we have not watched episode 8.
Yeah.
Layla, the only thing we know about her, she's never had an orgasm and she's getting divorced.
Yeah. They had mentioned it by this point.
Yeah. Demi and Brett are, in my opinion, the most solid.
Yeah.
They are obsessed with each other. They balance each other out. He is such a good husband from what we see.
Yep.
He knows where her downfalls are and he picks up the slack.
Him helping set up for that Valentine's Day party.
Babe, they're going to be here in 5 minutes.
And she's like, oh my God, no, they're not.
No decorations. Yes. He did it all. He did the charcuterie board.
He did.
Impressive.
We could get into this, I'm sure, at some point in life, but I don't always think that age gap relationships have to be icky.
No, and I don't think this one is icky. I think people are trying to make it icky.
And I'm sure that there's a good amount of them that are, of course. But and
if you listen to the whole story, because I just listened to their whole story. Okay, so we can cut this out if we want. But so they met through a family friend when Demi was 9 and Brett was 25. Yes, 25. And he was either about to be married or already married.
Okay, I knew that.
Yep. He had children with his first wife. Then they reconnected when he followed her on Instagram when she turned 18. And Demi was already dating who becomes her first husband. They get married. She's happy. They have children. They end up bumping into him at the gym. Her and her husband bump into Brett. And
they're the ones who convinced him to go on The Bachelor.
Yes. So they bump into Brett. They all are all talking.
I guess I knew more of this than I remembered.
Brett is going through a divorce at this point. And this is, I don't know if there's like a lot of hanging out, but they try to convince him to go on The Bachelorette. So while he's on that show, Demi and her husband get a divorce. So when he gets, I say kicked off, they all got kicked off. COVID happened. They all got sent home. He gets sent home, and Demi sees that he starts posting on Instagram, and she's like, well, that's fucking weird. He's supposed to be filming for The Bachelorette right now. Like, Demi and her husband at the time were the one who sent in his application. Like, they didn't even convince him to do it. They were like, you're doing it. And he ends up answering her and is like, we got kicked off because of COVID, da 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 da. She comes out and says that she is divorced now, and she is definitely not ready for a relationship, but she wouldn't mind meeting up for like coffee because she would like to discuss with somebody who's been divorced. Because like we said, she's Mormon.
Not a ton of people
who have been divorced. They end up meeting for coffee, and apparently, lovely little side note, the Bachelorette producers find out about this and are pissed because TMZ posts a photo of it. And they planned on bringing Claire's group back after the COVID thing settled down. It didn't end up happening. She left with somebody. So they instantly feel a spark that they had never felt before. And Demi comes right out and says, I am not doing anything until everything is completely finalized with my ex. I have a lot of respect for him. Like, we're not doing that. So they wait until all of that is finalized. And then I think they wait like a few months, and they go on their first date in September of 2021. He proposes in March of 2022. No, those dates feel wrong. It's very quick. They're married like 3 weeks later. And now they're living happily ever after.
Yeah.
People online are in fact trying to make it weird. All they're saying is that they met when she was 9 and he was 25, and they're not
adding
any further. Yeah. So they're making it gross.
Yeah.
So then we have Macy. I don't believe we've met Jacob yet at this point.
I don't think so.
If we have, it's
no.
like very...
I don't think we meet him until the Vegas trip.
Yeah. Macy, I think, is like kind of a queen bee. She isn't fighting for the top like Whitney.
She's like
and Taylor.
The first lieutenant.
Yeah.
Of whoever's in charge.
I think she has put herself in the position where at one point in time she was best friends with both Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Whitney.
Yeah.
So it's a little murky water for her. Michaela. She said
like 3 words in the whole show.
Michaela, in fact, pops off after this show ends.
Yeah.
Pops off, which is interesting to me because most of her popping off happens towards Whitney in a negative way. And in the show, you don't see her go one way or another with any of the Whitney drama.
She was very quiet, very neutral from what she was there for a lot of things that were happening, but she's never the focal point of any of it, whether it's good or bad.
I also wonder what state she's in. If she's constantly in pain, if she's uncomfortable, because that's going to
alter how you're acting. You're not going to sit
there and join in a girl fight if you're like in a ton of pain and not comfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we know about the 8 so far. The first 4 episodes.
Yep. I liked it.
I was hoping there was going to be more, but
I was hoping we would get some of what we got from the podcasts.
Yeah. I'm glad they are
doing so much press.
And not even just doing the press, but like talking about it as much as they are, because you often see things like this. I mean, I have listened to some podcasts. I listen to Call Her Daddy a lot. And she has had some big hitters on there who have gone through some like very public things, and they like touch on it and then they move on. So I'm glad that they're
getting deep and dirty.
And not that it's like my right to hear their story. But
no, but I like to hear the juicy goss. Well, if you've made it this far
and want to hear some more of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives drama, That title is so catchy and at the same time so hard to say.
Yeah. Yep.
I question myself every time. Like, follow, subscribe, comment.
Mm-hmm. Find us the.rogue podcast on our socials. And
leave us a review.
That'd be great. Comment. That'd be even better.
Yeah. Comment some more shows if you'd like us to do this, or even just like podcast episode ideas. If there's anything you want us to talk about. I know right now a good portion of our followers know us.
Yep.
Or know of us. So like we have kind of an interesting life. So if there's anything you want us to discuss, let us know.
Yep. Until then,
we'll see you next Tuesday.